Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. Please send your questions and comments to dj@artistfirst.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you've been warned. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Yeah, and you should take that warning to heart. Thank you very much, Scott. And I'm Michael Lyons.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Margaret.
And we're back.
Yep, here we are.
Like a piece of gum on your shoe that you can't get rid of. Like some unfinished business.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yes, I see that.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is something. You know, when you walk into a room, you're like, I forgot why I came in here. I have some unfinished business.
True.
It's not exactly the same thing. But tonight we are going to talk about it's sort of a formalization of that unfinished business phenomenon. A very interesting thing we ran across a couple 3 days ago, and it has to do with that idea of unfinished business, or you know, sort of the so there's nagging sort of things that you have to get to, and tasks that you have to complete, and even where they become, you know, some sort of below the fold, you know, sort of a subconscious thing. Yet they still occupy you, and you can be suddenly reminded at, you know, lying in your bed at midnight, staring at the ceiling, and all of a sudden 3 things will come up from wherever they sit when they're not in your present consciousness, and remind you, oh, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do the other thing, and you can the interesting thing about them, and sort of what is sort of the MacGuffin of this discussion, is that you can keep all those things in mind and all the little details that perhaps have to go along with them, and mainly because they're unfinished, they're uncompleted, and generally because you've committed to them, whether, you know, out loud or in your own mind, and so you've kind of taken a personal stake in them. You've kind of set yourself to say, I'm going to do this, and this is what it all entails, and I've kind of allocated the idea that I'm going to get this done, and then it sort of takes up a little life somewhere in your head.
Well, in general, we like to start and finish a task. You know, it's something that you usually get taught when you're young. You begin and you end. But when you're dealing with a task that involves many factors, the brain likes to organize it in a way that it can say, okay, I can close this. This task has been done. It's almost like a checkbox. Mm. And it's something that we're all programmed to do. It's just the way the brain functions in consciousness.
So this was an interesting sort of thing, because the woman who discovered this, or maybe did the initial research on this, her name was her last name was Zygarnik, which is Zygarnik, maybe like that, like cigar Nick. Very interesting, because it was around the beginning of the 19th century, the early 20s, that she was a psychologist, I believe, was her profession. And she was sitting in a cafe, and it was busy, and she was just noting that, you know, each waiter, who had multiple tables, was able to keep track of everything that each guest at every table had ordered, and what they were, you know, whether or not they'd gotten it, and you know, how much their bill was, and all that other stuff, all these little details, and they were able to keep it all in present memory. And she watched them, observed them, and then she started to quiz them, you know, just as sort of you know, to explore this a little bit. Brought them aside and said, well, let me just ask you a question. What are they having? And they could just rattle it off, right? And she tested a few of the people and said, yeah, they have this in their memory. But then the interesting thing, the thing that she found in continuing her research, was that as soon as that table finished up and they paid their check, and then she'd go back to the waiter and say, well, what did that table number 3 have? You just dealt with them 10 minutes ago. And they literally had no idea. And I think we've all had that sort of a phenomenon, because when you're in the midst of doing something, you have all of what needs to get done. I need this and I need this, I need these tools and that, these resources, and I have it all in my head, and I got to go to the store for this and that, and I get it all together. And I'm in the middle of it, and it gets interrupted because something else happens, as life is in many ways. And then you have something just equally important, or whatever it is, and maybe two or three things like this will happen, and you'll keep them all in memory. You'll kind of juggle the whole thing, and maybe you can't even get to the task that you had initially started because something else interrupted it. But yet it's there. It's there because you've taken a commitment, or you have an interest. And as Margaret just said, our brains are wired for this. They're wired to organize a task, to plot it out, mentally, what has to be done, gather what needs to be, the resources you might need. And then if it gets interrupted, it doesn't just go away. That's the characteristic of the brain, is it puts it in something, warm storage, let's say.
It's the back burner.
Yes, exactly what people call it. Mm-hmm. You put it on the back burner. But there's something very interesting about the back burner. It's on. The back burner is not out.
No.
That pot, figuratively speaking, is being kept warm. It's not complete. The meal or whatever it is, the task is not done. And 5 other things come in, and you have to deal. But then you will turn figuratively from everything you've done, and you'll turn back to that pot, and you'll grab that handle, and you'll pull it right to the front, and you go, oh, I know exactly what I was about to do next. Well, that's what became to be known as the Zygarnik effect. In other words, when you have committed to a task, that task remains on the back burner. And a significant amount of resources, memory resources, are committed to keeping that task warm. And you have multiple things. You have things that stretch over months, over years. People have an amazing capacity to have these things kind of lined up. Especially your most effective people, the people who are good at getting things done, will, if you ask them where they are with all the 300 things that they're doing, they can rattle them off. I'm doing this. I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And you can be kind of amazed that they keep it all in memory. Well, that the opposite of that is that when those things are done, you check off the list. And then you probably have had this experience. You think to yourself, well, what was it that I had to do? Someone will ask you, what did you do to get that done? Well, I watched a video, and I did. I don't know, it was something like that. I don't know, but it's done now. I don't have to care about it anymore. Your brain releases those resources because the task is complete. And this effect is also used and became exploited, if you will, by folks who maybe didn't understand that it was called the Zygarnik effect, but understood that if you hand somebody a story, and then at the end of that story or at the end of that chapter, you leave something unresolved. You have a very complex story that you have in your head. This one's like a soap opera, right? This one's going here, and this one's going there, and this one's going to kill that one, and there's all these plots, and you got all these plot lines, and everything's all in your head, and you've got it all. You're invested. You love these characters. And then they come to the end of season 1, and they always leave you hanging on 2 or 3 really important things that you want to get. You want to get resolution. Well, now you've got to wait 6 months before the first episode of season 2, and there's just a fever pitch because in the back of your head, all those things are on the back burner.
Right. Well,
that whole plot line, everything that you knew about these people.
That's the foundation of daytime soap operas.
And of every good series.
But it's leaving you hanging. And people don't like that feeling. It's like, I want this to be resolved. That report that she brought up was very interesting because the brain isn't ordering things by importance. It's ordering things by whether or not it's complete. And I found that fascinating. It's a sub-program in the head that says, well, this is still not done. It may not be as important as something else, but it's still not done. And I've always wondered about that because I've noted that tendency with myself and other people. Why is this coming up again? Why is this important? And because it's not high up on the scale of importance. But when you realize that there's a part of your brain that's distinguishing or ordering things according to completion, that's a big aha. It's like, wait a minute.
Right. You're hacking the sub-program here a little bit.
What?
You're understanding how the brain, you're seeing like inside baseball, like how the brain works. Like, wait a minute, it's not whether it's important or not. It's like whether it's done or not.
Well, I find it fascinating because order of importance in a thinking mind or a conscious mind is relative to, let's say, if it's going to hurt a lot in some way, or life or death is usually what people say. But if it's going to produce a lot more problems or not. But what's popping in your head is completion. Oh, did I shut that door? Mm-hmm. Did I put that back?
Right.
Did I? And I had always wondered, it was like, why is this thought floating around here? Oh.
And there you are in the midst of doing something that relatively is much more important. Like, I don't know, you've got to make sure that the fire is totally turned down or whatever, because it's important because, you could have a problem with the fire in your house. Yet some little thing like, did I remember to turn off the, like you say, the lights upstairs? Okay, and it'll literally drag you upstairs to check. Or it'll bother you at the moment when you should be concentrating on something else, which is arguably much more important or much more immediate.
Right.
And yet those subconscious things, those things which are just not done yet, acquire an outsized importance because of the way the brain treats them. It treats them as
it's unfinished.
Unfinished because, and that you've taken it to a commitment. You've said, I'm going to do this. So you've committed, and it literally causes the brain to segregate off some resources, to dedicate something like a little pilot light, which is a great analogy, a little pilot light in the back of the stove. So there's a little burner going, and so the gas is running, the stove is warm, the pot's still simmering, and no matter what you're doing, the pot catches your eye, your figurative brain eye. Oh, there's that pot back there that I haven't turned off yet, and I got to get back to that. The socks need folding. Meanwhile you're battling whatever it is that you're battling.
You're battling cancer, and the socks need folding.
The socks need folding, and it's like, oh God, I got to go feed the fuck. The socks. There's and you say, okay, well, I'm just being conscientious. I'm just getting what needs to get done. But if you were truly to be parsimonious with your resources, you would say, look, someone else can fold the damn socks. Give that up. But you don't want to. You feel a resistance in your mind of giving up these tiny things, these routines. Can be some of these things too, where you take on a routine. And then the routine that it didn't get completed because I'm supposed to, every Tuesday I'm supposed to do whatever. Every Friday afternoon I've got to do this, and I skipped it. Oh gosh, I got the Friday afternoon thing. I got to do it. And yet it's arguably a waste of time, especially if you're doing something that's really important, but it'll still bother you.
Well, it's fascinating to me because I do know that the body response can't tell the difference between a physical going on and a mental remembrance, let's say, a memory of something that has happened, and your body goes through the exact same response as if it's in this situation you're remembering once again, that stressor. So you look at that and you're like, how is it possible to be able to I guess it would be curtailing that. In other words, the reason this happens is because there's a part of you that has already committed to the start to the finish. If I started, I'm going to finish it. And if you understand that that's a given in you. Whenever you start something, are you committed to it to the end? There's the question. Have you given permission for it to fit into that category that you will see this to the end? And when you see it to the end, that's when the phrase they use is the file closes. All the information gets into that file and then it gets forgotten. And I find that fascinating because the example here is waiters taking orders for a table, which is understandably, literally, check boxes. You're writing down the order, and then if it's been completed, you check box it. And then is the bill paid? That's another check box. That is the check box process. So when you write it down, this is the commitment. This is, okay, this person is having this particular meal. This one's chicken, this one's fish, this one's whatever, salad. But it plays over into our everyday lives. So it's understanding that when you don't complete a task, it's a stressor on your system, which is probably the reason why we have so much stress in our society right now, because there's so many things that demand our attention that we want to be able to complete, but can't necessarily do it.
So the interesting thing about this as well is that you can pick these things up without even really understanding that you have picked them up.
Right.
So stressors, you just mentioned that you want to see something completed. Well, okay, you say, well, I don't have anything that I want to see completed. But that's not true. Every new stimulus that comes into you these days is almost designed to trigger this commitment and then completion, sort of driver. So when people want to engage you on social media, they try to give you something which will, satisfy the initial need of interest, and then say, coming soon, or breaking news, or stay tuned, this kind of stuff. And then if you say, well, I'd like to know, that's all you have to say is, well, I'd like to know, or I'd like to figure this out, next week it's going to happen. 2 weeks it's going to happen. All right. So in the back of your head, you've taken that on. Now, consciously, it's not there. You're just going along with your everyday life. But the back burner, which used to have maybe one or two pots, now has a whole, east wing full of pots, which are all burbling along.
Yeah.
Because you want to know this, and you want to know that, and you want to know this thing, and the story and the show that I'm watching, and all this sort of stimulus coming into our lives today is sort of an unrealized burden. And that's one thing. That's one of the stressors that we have here. And then there's the actual things that happen to you in your life, which can become unresolved or unprocessed things that you have to look at, or you've actively kind of pushed them into a category that you don't want to deal with it right now. But yet just doing that, because of the way the brain works, can cause one of these new rooms to get opened up. You have the typical back burner room, which is where you keep all your things that all your soap operas that you're watching. And then you might have the room that has a little bit more of caution and tape across it. And in there you've got the things that you've taken on because an event in your life has caused you trauma or caused you grief or caused you pain or caused you sorrow, and or somebody has wronged you, or somebody has you've had a conflict with someone. These things too can end up in this sort of unfinished business category, and oftentimes, the resolution of these smaller things. I had to wait 6 months, but the show came on, and I made sure I watched it, and I got to the end, and I got to the, I was able to resolve the thing, or the 2 weeks went by, and I was able to get the information that they promised, or the whole disappointment of, well, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but at least even that's sort of a resolution. But our take on this, kind of moving towards what we wanted to go from the Zeigarnik effect, is that these types of stressors on your system, this unfinished business, this idea that the brain has rooms of places where it's keeping things warm, keeping things alive, and thereby draining, because you've got a limited amount of resources. You're not an infinite thing. It's draining.
You got to clear the cache.
You got to clear the cache. You got to. It starts to become like, I've got so. You say to yourself in the middle of the night, I've got so many things that I'm doing. I've got and then there's things I don't even want to think about, but yet they're still there. The things that you don't want to think about, and that you're maybe actively not processing, are still there, because if you get triggered, you'll suddenly be dragged right back to the incident that happened 20 years ago, that had this terrible blow up with somebody I really love, and I said some things, they said some things, and there it is, unresolved. That unfinished business is much worse than the day-to-day kind of, I didn't clean out the sock drawer. But as Margaret said just a little bit earlier, the body can't tell the difference. The stress that's coming from the sock drawer, or the stress that's coming from the thing that you're actively avoiding going to resolve, the unforgiven things, the unfinished business, the problem you had with the person 20 years ago, it's still there, and it's still actively taking away from the present moment and sort of becoming a drain on you.
Well, I think the phrase of unfinished business, okay, we all understand it's not done, okay. But what happens if it's a loss, a great loss, and there was many things still not done? At that point, grief comes in, and it becomes long-term grief that needs to be dealt with. And usually the coping skills for dealing with long-term grief over great loss or things that were not finished is difficult to describe. Maybe that's the best way to do it, because what you wind up doing is, again, it's like a bigger version of the back burner. You put it to the side, and you deal with it as best you can, bit by bit, or if you're graced to be able to be in a space where you can grieve, truly grieve, in a safety space where you're not going to be having people coming in to interfere with that grieving process. That is good to be able to process it, but it's also understanding that any loss or sorrow that happens in your life brings you back, as you said, hon. Brings you back to that point, and that door opens again, and you look at the long-term grief that you have to continue processing. So it's making space for the fact that life is full of joys and sorrows, and to be able to handle both. But you have to be very, very aware of yourself, your feelings, the flow of emotions, as well as what you're thinking at that point, and whether or not you need to have a place where you can let off the pressure or the steam of that sat upon grief.
Maybe it's a good moment to bring in our quote, because we have a lovely quote from a gentleman by the name of Stephen Levine. Do you want to read that?
Sure. Unattended sorrow resonates with the long-term grief of unfinished business. Forgiveness finishes that unfinished business. Levine.
Stephen Levine. And so what you just said is sort of an echo, or what he just said is an echo of what you were talking about. But I think that, to go back to what you were saying, when loss, and he says unattended sorrow, and I love that phrase, when you have unattended sorrow, so sorrow, grief, loss happens. And then if you're blessed, you said it before, if you're blessed that you're allowed to grieve, because oftentimes in our society, we aren't allowed to grieve. And I think in earlier societies, when people lived a little closer to the bone, a little closer to reality, you would give people time to grieve. It was actually a formal thing. Sitting Shiva was a time of 7 days of truly just letting this person do nothing else. You would bring food, you would sit with them, and what you're there to do is just be there while they do nothing else but grieve, but experience the loss, get through at least that first acute. But in this time compressed society, people say, take a day or so, get yourself together. And people do that. They literally, almost limit their ability to process grief, maybe because you're overwhelmed, maybe because you just don't have the time, or you don't have the luxury, if you will, to allow that processing to occur. But if you don't allow it, if you have this unattended sorrow, it's still there. There's still a room full of this grief that you have not yet gone through. And the further away you get from it, the more it will burden you. It does not go away. It doesn't become less. You've committed to this thing because it's happened to you. It's given you this sorrow, this grief, this loss was real. And then you as time goes by, you can be triggered back into it, and you'll be right back there because you haven't completed it, because that closure state has not been reached. Processing grief is like that. It requires time. It takes a toll.
Yes, you have to literally schedule yourself to have this open-ended time so that if you need to grieve, you allow it to come out. But this open-ended time means that it's as I said, has to be a safe space where you know that you can just bawl, scream, do whatever it needs be done to get this out without interference. Because I do remember incidents where I needed to go and really just cry. And I would have people come over to me and say, "Oh, no, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. You have to be strong." And you just looked at them like, you have no idea what I'm going through. And I had to literally have enough grace just push them away and go someplace else. Because it was too... they meant well. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. But you know that phrase, hurt people hurt people? Well, when you're in that phase of ridiculous amounts of overwhelm emotion, and you're in pain, all you can think of is, I got to get this out. And the people that are trying to prevent you from doing this, even though they're saying they're helping you, they're just looked at as an obstacle. You get out of my way. You don't want to deal with this. And that's the truth of it. They really don't want to deal with it. That's why they're trying to stuff it all back in. So that if you're going to deal with it, you're going to deal with it when they're not there.
Right. This is a very good point, is people will interrupt your grief because they can't take it.
Right.
And if you allow your grief to be interrupted, and oftentimes people will, if you're, people will offer in very well meaning, they'll offer things like, drugs, or they'll offer things like, that will, quote unquote, deaden the pain or take it away or try to distract you away from it. Rather than embracing this sorrow because you have to, because there's no way around it, because, to some extent, the depth of the sorrow is related directly to the depth of the relationship that you had with whatever it is that you lost. So or whomever. And that interruption, however well-meaning, all it does is it takes the current present grief, which is on its way to being processed and on its way to closure. You can get through sorrow, the acute phase of sorrow, the lingering phase of sorrow. You can get through all of that. But you have to allow yourself to do it. You have to give yourself the permission to grieve. And people literally will take the advice of others and stop. Take the advice, their own internal, I just can't, I have to go back to this. I can't stop this particular part of my life. I cannot deal with this right now. That doesn't make it go away. It actually just puts it into one of these back burner rooms, and it occupies like the Zeigarnik effect says, it occupies a significant portion of some part of your brain. However much you don't understand it, we don't understand how this particularly happens, because it's not in the consciousness. It doesn't sit there and say, hey, got some grief over here that you got to deal with. No, it's not so obvious, but it affects you in measurable and subtle ways. And then it can be triggered. If you, Margaret said it, suddenly something will remind you, trigger you. And all that unprocessed grief or sorrow will come roaring back. You have the choice right then and there whether you're going to deal with some more of it. Maybe you can deal with it at that moment and you can progress through your grief. But oftentimes it's so sudden, it's so frightening to you or to those around you, it just gets pushed back again and pushed back again. that doesn't process it. That doesn't bring closure. It just puts it right back into this little rubber room where it bounces around like a little ball of energy, saying, I'm going to have to be dealt with sometime. And until that time, the brain will keep that warm. It'll keep that going.
Yeah, it takes a piece of your soul when you do something like that. You literally have to take a piece of your soul energy to contain that until you can come back to it and process it. And the more you ignore it, the more it builds, the more drained you are. Until you get to a point where you realize, that's it, I've just got to find a spot and do this. But it's not easy. Easy has nothing to do with it. And it's scary for everybody else who's around you because they have no idea what you're going through. And of course, their immediate reaction is, we have to alleviate her pain or her sorrow, or let's give her a drug to numb her.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, no, you don't understand. Living means that you have to feel things and you have to go through it. If I don't go through it right now, it will come back and bite me.
And during the time that it's not being dealt with, it's not. It doesn't make it harmless. It doesn't make it harmless. In other words, the brain doesn't allow you to just encapsulate things. You really don't get a free pass. The energy that it takes, the effects that it has, subconscious effects that it has on your psychological health, on your soul, that fragment that you've broken off of yourself, can become, the genesis of suffering. It can become the genesis of the pain body, as Tully likes to say. The unprocessed grief, and one we haven't really touched on, which is very similar, which is the unforgiven injury. When someone has injured you, when you've been terribly wronged, when somebody has frightened you or traumatized you so horribly, and that righteous grievance. Okay, it's not grief, but it's a grievance that you have against this person. They did something to me, and I will never forgive them. Yeah, you'll never forgive them. You're going to hold that in another room. The unforgiven grievances, the unforgiven traumas, the unforgiven hurts.
That is your unfinished business. It falls into that category of unfinished business. And because the emotion of anger or
fear,
demand for justice is there, it feeds into this cycle so that it comes back up. And it takes pieces of you. It takes pieces of your soul every single time it comes up and you try to push it back down. That's why forgiveness is so important. It doesn't mean that forgiving that individual means that you condone the action, that you say it's okay, and it's not okay. But you don't need to be caught in this endless loop of your soul being eaten away piece by piece. You don't deserve that. That's hell right there. You are more than the hell that you went through, because this is an experience that you've gone through. And the realization that that does not define you. You are not a victim. You see what has happened to you in your experience. You felt what it's like to be a victim. but you are not in that victim mentality forever. You can feel all the emotions of the anger, the rage, the cry for vengeance, the cry for justice, all of that, still there. But I forgive you because you do not need to live in this endless loop in my head. I'm not going to feed that any longer. I take that and give it over to Source, to God, the higher power that I call God. I put it at the foot of the cross, he who has suffered, because this is suffering. I put it there and say, there is another way. And I'm relying on the fullness of life, the fullness of love, to bring me to a point where forgiveness exists.
Well, and what you get from that is two things. Closure, which is the most important thing for this, this primitive part of your brain that wants to keep things. It needs to put a dot on it. It needs to put a check on it. It needs to say, I'm done with that. How you get there is important, but getting there is equally important. So, go ahead.
In the article, it's saying that when you write something down as a checklist, a reminder, this is pretty much what you're going to be tending. You write it down. The file closes, as it says. It's like, okay, that consciousness, that bandwidth is given back to you. It's freed up. Because writing it down, that's why sometimes writing it down just feels like a relief, even though you haven't really done anything, but it feels like, oh, okay, I've written it down. There's a distinct feeling of, okay, something's going on. I've closed this particular loop. I've opened this other one. And even though you haven't really solved it, the brain goes, okay, this is registered and this is the return to. I'm going to come back to this, which is enough for the system, the immediate system, to calm down. So maybe a good suggestion would be, if that works for you, if writing things down really does give you relief, make a list of things that you know God's going to take care of for you. This is God's to-do list for me.
I like that.
This vengeance part here, or this emptiness here, or this loss over here. This is what God's going to take over for me. And when you look at the list, there is a sense of relief when you do that.
You've unburdened yourself.
Yes. And allowed your immediate system space. You know that these issues cannot be resolved in this place and time right now, but it will be resolved. It's down on the God to-do list.
That's a beautiful mechanism, and it parallels. Some people will do the same thing. If you have an unforgiven situation in your life, that person may no longer be alive. That person may not be speaking to you, but people will find a lot of. This is a technique where if you write it down, as you just said, people will write full letters of forgiveness and literally write, "I forgive you." And even if they never post it, if the person never gives it, just writing it down, or sometimes just out loud affirming it. Margaret, you've done a lot of work with addicts, And those support groups, a lot of it is because they out loud affirm that they're going to do something, that they bring some closure to, to the addiction, to finding some way to unburden this sort of cycle of addiction, this cycle of unfinished business, if you will, in getting, treatment, getting cured, getting to the next step. Some of the writing it down, some of the voicing it out loud, some of the witnessing of something, physically on paper, does that. It puts a certain level of closure. It's like saying, I've done that step, because if you're grieving, there's so many things. And it's like when you have a whole kitchen full of stuff that you've got to clean up and it looks overwhelming. But if you say, okay, I'm going to forgive just this today. I'm going to say, I'm going to forgive this first thing.
Right. And
that first thing that you forgive today, whatever it is, takes it off the table.
Right.
And you get, as you just said, a little space. And what you really get is a little peace. Because all of these things that are on the back burner or in the closet, that has all the things that you're not thinking about or not wanting to deal with, or whatever room is full of this junk, every bit of it is plugged into you and is running some sort of power from you.
Right.
When you unplug it, when you write it down and say, this is done, I forgive this, unplug it, it no longer has that claim on you. Now, does it mean it stopped existing? No. Does it mean whoever did whatever they did, or whatever loss or pain or grief that happened to you, that it never happened? Of course not. It's part of your lived experience. It's part of your life story. It merely just says that it's not a thing that remains undone. When your life story is written, figuratively speaking, it's put down, it's written down. You've done that. This happened to me. But if it's still happening because it hasn't yet completed, because you still are grieving, you're still unforgiving, you're still unfinished business, you can't write it down. You can't close that season of the episode of whatever show that you're running in your head. Once you can do that, it's gone from the point of view of sucking away your awareness, sucking away your energy. And it becomes part of your story, which is just permanent. It's just, that's what happened to me.
It's allowing your awareness to take the first step out of the personal, out of the ego responses.
Yeah.
And say, okay, we can take this and put it over here because we are more than what we think. There's an area, there's a aspect of us that is outside this immediate, I have to do right now to finish this business. I'm more than this. I'm more than this particular event. There's something greater. And putting a list together, saying that there's going to be divine intervention. You can actually, that's a thought. Divine intervention list. I like that. You've made a list for divine intervention. And you realize that there's a part of you that understands this. It's like it's outside my hands. I need something outside of me to help address this. And it's a interior step for your own sanity, honestly.
Yeah. Because
it's like these things, how people say, oh, the voices in your head. Well, half the voices in your head is because it's unfinished business.
Yeah.
It's at you because it's not done yet.
Yeah.
So allowing that voice to be acknowledged, saying, okay, this is what it's been carrying, this unfinished business. But to put it down on a piece of paper saying this is to be addressed. It helps to relieve your internal stress. And then understanding the problem, whether or not this is something you actually can do, or do you need divine intervention?
I think that you've really struck upon something there. I like God's to-do list. I like the divine intervention. I think that the closure you're getting there is two things. You're naming the issue.
Right.
So you're bringing it out from the shadows. You're bringing it off the back burner. But you're not saying it's my issue that I must deal with. What you're really saying is that I'm going to put closure on this, and I'm going to give it to something that I trust will take care of it. You can say God's to-do list. You can put it back to source. You can put it on to divine intervention. I think all those mechanisms work perfectly well. They're all correct, because other than that, when you are the one who is wronged, when you've taken over the unfinished business, as in the Zeigarnik effect says, you've committed to it. It's your task. It's like it's on my list. Mm-hmm. And so more things that pile up on your list, every one of them takes some piece of your energy subconsciously, but it's there. And then if you basically are able to clean out that list, you open up the closets, you pick up one thing, and you say, I know exactly what this is. This is from 27 years ago when so-and-so did this to me, and I was really, really upset and really, really afraid. And I'm going to put a closure on that. I'm going to say, I forgive you. It's not up to me to punish you. It's not up to me to make it right. It's just up to me to say, I forgive. I give up all commitment to this as being my fault or my burden or my thing to solve. And I put you in the hands of God's to-do list. Say, right. And the beautiful say, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
What that really means is that vengeance isn't yours. You don't have to go and make it right. You don't have to go and extract payment or extract justice.
Right.
But you just have to say, I've been carrying this a long time. I've been carrying this half my life. I forgive you totally, completely. Write it down. I take you off my list. You're not my problem.
Right.
But you can say right at that same time, you're God's problem now.
Oh, yes.
You and God have to work this out.
Right.
And what's the old Dolly Parton? God may forgive you, but I won't. No, you should forgive them, but God won't. Maybe. It's up to them to figure out what they did wrong. It becomes no longer your burden. You get to have peace.
The only way that a person can see that they've been a problem is if they're enlightened by something outside of themselves. Otherwise, they're trapped in this mindset of, I'm right, or this is the way it should be. It's got to be this way. If. And you realize when that mind is so ossified in a certain way of thinking, only an outside intervention is going to be able to help. And it's usually a spark of inspiration that's got to hit them. Mm-hmm. It's not logic. Logic does not work when it comes to someone in a mindset of this is the way, this is the right way.
Mm-hmm. Or the just way.
Or not even, it's just this is the way I feel it's got to be done because I've judged that this is the only good way.
Right.
And you sit there and you're like, I can't help you. There's no space for anything else to come in. You've locked everything down into this tight little spin. Only God can help you. And it's very sad to see because people do lock themselves down that way. It's only when they are hurting so much that they'll be open to a new way. They've got to come to the end of themselves. It's like they've tried this, I've tried it over and over again. And what was the phrase? If you try the same thing over again, expecting a different result?
Definition of insanity. Yeah.
You're driving yourself insane.
Right. Unfinished business will do that too. People will say, I'm going crazy with all these things that are on my plate.
Right.
And those aren't even half the things that are really on their plate. So this mechanism, I mean, the whole idea of forgiveness gets pushed away by this egoic mechanism. I'll never forgive them. I can't. They shouldn't get away with what they did to me, Or I'll never get over this. This terrible grief it'll never be the same again. This person I lost they won't be able to do this. They won't be able to do that. I won't see them graduate. I won't see them get married. I won't see them whatever. Yes, all those things are true. But if you keep the unforgiven alive, the only person who's being harmed by that is you. And if you keep the loss alive by re-inflicting the wound of what will not be, the things that could have been or what might have been, you will never finish that business. You'll never unburden yourself from that grief. And you're not honoring that person by saying what could have happened, because what you should say is, this is what did happen. This was their life.
Yes.
This was a complete life. And in the moment that we lived it, we burned with the light of 1,000 suns.
Right.
The experience of that life, because everyone's life is different and everyone's life is long or short or whatever it is.
Your life is unique and your life is so precious. And unfortunately, we have reached the end of our hour.
Oh, we have some unfinished business, though.
I see.
I'm going to forgive us for not getting to it. But you're right, we have. But yes, forgive the wrongs that come to you, because you'll be the one who benefits. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.